The houses in town stood in rows, each painted in sharp, impossible shades of the rainbow. Lumo, Bobo, and Lulu stood behind the rusted metal fence of the old playground, their palms pressed against the cold, flaking iron. The playground was quiet, a place forgotten by the rest of the neighborhood. But today, the center of the grass held something that did not belong. A blue door stood upright in the middle of the field. It was tiny, barely the height of a pencil, yet it cast a sharp, long shadow against the dirt. There was no wall attached to it, no frame, no hinges connected to anything but the air itself. The three friends stepped through the gate, their boots crunching on dry leaves as they moved closer. They stopped 10 feet away. The door stood perfectly still, a solid, vibrant rectangle of paint amidst the dull, trampled grass. Bobo took a hesitant step forward, his eyes locked on the handle. The silence of the playground grew heavy, pressing into their ears. It was a door to nowhere, standing in the middle of a world that suddenly felt far too small. Bobo reached out, his fingers hovering inches from the handle before he finally gripped it. He yanked hard. The door refused to budge, anchored by some unseen force. Lulu stepped forward, her expression focused, and tapped her knuckles against the wood. Once, twice, 3 times. A soft, clean click echoed across the grass. The door swung wide. They did not see the other side of the playground. They saw tomorrow. The space beyond the frame was alive with color. Trees arched over a path, their leaves dripping with liquid gold that shimmered in the light. A stone fountain floated 3 feet above the concrete, water cascading upward in defying arcs. Blue butterflies swarmed the air, moving in a synchronized cloud that pulsed like a heartbeat. The children leaned forward, their faces illuminated by the glow from within. The playground had been completely rewritten. Every element hung in a state of suspended motion, defying gravity and logic. They stood breathless, their eyes scanning the golden canopy and the hovering water, absorbing the scale of the transformation. The mundane world behind them vanished, replaced by a horizon that hummed with energy. Lumo squinted, his gaze darting between the floating fountain and the golden trees. He leaned through the frame, his hands bracing against the threshold. He looked for the familiar patch of white fur and the twitch of a tail. Nothing. Lulu stepped closer, her eyes sweeping the ground beneath the hovering water, then climbing the branches of the glowing trees. She called out a name, but the sound died instantly in the thick, vibrant air. Bobo gripped the edge of the door, his knuckles turning white. He pushed further into the space, his boots sinking into soil that felt unnaturally warm. The butterflies swarmed closer, their wings brushing against his face, but he did not notice. He was looking at the empty path. Sunny was not there. The silence of the future suddenly felt heavy, like a trap closing. The excitement vanished, replaced by a cold knot in their chests. They looked at each other, eyes wide with the same realization. The magic was beautiful, but it was hollow. Lumo grabbed the handle from the inside and pulled it hard. The door groaned, resisting for a split second before it slammed shut. The golden light vanished, leaving them back in the dim, gray reality of the rusted playground fence. The metal of the fence turned cold against their palms as they stood in the dark. Nobody spoke. The playground was a skeleton of shadows under the moon. Lumo paced the length of the fence, his boots crunching rhythmically on the gravel, tracing a path that led nowhere. Bobo sat on the grass, his eyes locked on the spot where the blue door had been, watching the empty air as if it might flicker back into existence. Lulu walked to the edge of the playground, then back, her movements jagged and restless. Every time a car passed on the distant road, they turned their heads in unison, expecting a sound, a sign, or a flicker of light. The night stretched thin. The temperature dropped, forcing them to pull their arms tight against their bodies to stay warm. They did not sleep. They could not. The silence of the night was a weight, pressing down on the secrets they held. Hours blurred into a singular, agonizing wait. Finally, the sky began to bruise with purple, then softened to a pale, clinical gray. The first sliver of sun crested the horizon, catching the rusted iron of the fence. Without a word, they stood up, their eyes fixed on the center of the grass. The morning had arrived. They reached the center of the grass, the dew soaking their shoes. Lumo grabbed the edge of the blue door. With a sharp tug, it swung open. The golden leaves were there, just as before.
But the air felt brittle. Under the shadow of a massive, glowing tree, they saw him. Sunny sat huddled in the dirt, his body shaking with every breath. He stared at the barren, gray ground, ignoring the light around him. Lulu gasped and took a step forward, her hand outstretched to pull him through. But as she moved, the door groaned. The frame began to warp. The edges pulled inward, the wood splintering as the opening collapsed. They lunged for it, fingers clawing at the shrinking gap. The space vanished faster than they could react. Within seconds, the door was no larger than a dinner plate, then a saucer. Then, with a final, sickening crack, it compressed until it was the size of a single coin, embedded in the air. The view of the golden garden flickered and died.
They stood on the grass, hands empty, staring at a tiny, solid circle of blue that refused to budge.
The barrier was absolute. Sunny was on the other side, and they were locked out. Bobo slammed his palm against the tiny blue circle, but the air remained hard as stone. He shoved, his face turning red with the strain, yet the coin-sized door did not yield. Lumo stepped in, locking his fingers with Bobo's, and together they poured their weight into the center of the air. The space groaned, a low, metallic hum vibrating against their skin, but the opening stayed shut. They were pushing against a lock that had no key.
Lulu stood back, her eyes darting between the stubborn wood and the empty playground around them.
She realized the door was not reacting to their strength, but to their intent. She closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of damp earth, and let go of the need to force the future to arrive. "It is not a wall," she whispered. "It is a question." She stepped forward, her voice steady and clear.
"We do not need to break it. We need to know what tomorrow requires." As she spoke, the tension in the air snapped. The blue coin shuddered, then stretched. The edges pulled outward with a sound like tearing paper. The door expanded, widening until the golden glow of the garden bled back into the gray light of the morning. They peered through the gap, their breathing finally slowing into a rhythm of focused, determined hope. They stood motionless, eyes fixed on the garden within. The golden leaves hung heavy, and the air shimmered with a strange, pulsing light. It beat like a giant, slow heart, casting rhythmic waves of luminescence across the grass. Sunny remained by the tree, his gaze locked on the barren soil at his feet. Suddenly, the sky within the door parted. A single silver seed detached itself from the clouds, spinning through the air in a slow, silent arc. It landed with a soft thud at Sunny's feet. The moment it touched the ground, the entire garden dimmed. The light vanished, replaced by a deep, throbbing shadow that made the hair on their arms stand up. The playground began to vibrate. It was not a window into a dream, but a message carved in light. They saw the barren patch of earth Sunny was guarding, and the truth hit them with the force of a blow. The future was dying. This was a warning, a countdown to a silence that would swallow everything they knew. The urgency surged through them, cold and sharp. They could no longer be observers. The door was not just a view. It was a call to arms. They pulled their hands back, their faces tight with the sudden, crushing weight of responsibility. They had to act, and they had to act now. They spun away from the door, boots tearing through the grass as they sprinted toward the giant tree. The soil beneath it was cracked and gray, a dead patch in the center of the vibrant town. Bobo reached it first, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He dropped to his knees, fumbling with the cap of his canteen. The water splashed onto the parched earth, but it vanished instantly, swallowed by the thirsty ground.
It is not enough. Lumo shouted, his hands hovering over the dust. Lulu moved into the center, her eyes fixed on the spot where the seed had landed in the vision. She began to hum, a low, steady melody that vibrated in her chest and carried through the cooling air.
Lumo knelt beside her, pressing his palms flat against the dirt.
He felt the cold, unyielding resistance of the earth. "You do not have to grow alone," he stated, his voice ringing with a sudden, fierce resolve. Bobo tilted the canteen until the last drop fell, then gripped the soil with his fingers.
They stopped trying to fix the future and started feeding the present. They worked in a perfect,
frantic rhythm, their movements locked together, pouring every ounce of their desperation into the ground. The soil did not move yet, but the air around their hands began to hum with a faint, rising warmth. The earth gave a sudden, violent shudder that rattled their teeth. Lumo yanked his hands back as a jagged crack splintered outward from the center of the patch. For a heartbeat, there was only darkness, a void beneath the surface. Then, a single, brilliant green shoot pierced the crust, unfurling with a soft, audible snap. It was followed by another, and then a dozen more. The movement was frantic, a tidal wave of growth surging through the dead soil.
They scrambled backward, watching as the patch expanded. The shoots thickened,
twisting into stems that glowed with a pulsing neon vitality. Flowers erupted in rapid succession, their petals wide and luminous. They cast a soft, rhythmic light that washed over the playground, turning the gray shadows into a sanctuary of vibrant,
bioluminescent color. The air filled with the scent of wet soil and sweet, blooming pollen. The trio stood stunned as the garden spread, climbing the trunk of the giant tree and carpeting the grass in a sea of living,
shifting light. The tension that had held their chests tight for hours finally snapped, replaced by the sheer, overwhelming sight of the dark ground reclaimed. It was not just life. It was a defiant, glowing proof of their success. The playground was no longer a place of decay, but a radiant, breathing forest of light.
The morning sun climbed over the fence, but the blue door was gone. The space where it had stood was now occupied by thick, glowing vines. Lumo, Bobo, and Lulu stepped into the center of the garden,
their boots sinking into the soft, bioluminescent moss. The silence was heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming petals.
They looked at the empty air, then at each other. The playground felt vast, a map of their success, yet the path ahead had vanished. Suddenly, Sunny trotted from behind the giant tree. The pet let out a loud, sharp sneeze that echoed against the playground fence. The sound rippled through the garden like a physical pulse. Beneath the grass, the ground hummed. 3 small shapes pushed upward through the soil. They were doors, each the size of a book, glowing with a soft inner light. One bore the mark of a silver star, one a crimson heart, and the third a swirling question mark. They huddled close, breath held tight as the locks clicked in unison. The doors swung wide. 3 distinct worlds swirled inside, each filled with motion, color, and the promise of a new horizon. Lumo, Bobo, and Lulu exchanged a single, knowing look. They reached out together. The adventure was not ending, it was only beginning.